The U.S. certainly does spend a lot of money fighting drugs.
But now some claim marijuana could actually be a moneymaker if the government would change its stance on the drug. Randy Myers here with more on the debate.
Well, whether or not to legalize marijuana has been debated for decades now, but two congressmen now think they have the formula to finally make it legal to smoke pot in the U.S. They say it's all about common sense fiscal policy. They say stop spending money on enforcement and start taxing the drug to the tune of billions of dollars in new revenue. But does the concept really have a shot, either nationally or here in Minnesota? We're talking to Tom Pritchard from the Minnesota Family Council and Kurtis Hanna. Kurtis is the executive director for Minnesota NORML, a group pushing for reform of marijuana laws. Tom, I want to begin with you because this debate, and I know we've talked about this, more and more states are legalizing it in some form or fashion. In fact, and more Americans seem to point to the side of legalizing it as well. In fact, a Pew Research study for the first time in 40 years said more Americans are in favor of legalizing it. What is the strongest argument against when you keep in mind that hundreds of millions, even billions of dollars in tax revenue might be raised by the legalization of that drug?
Well, I think you have to look at the social costs of it and realize that marijuana is not a benign substance. It's a mind-altering, addictive, and a gateway drug. And I think we're starting to see how it really plays out when it starts to be legalized. In California, which has medical marijuana, they find an increased prevalence. There's greater prevalence from drug driving than drunk driving. The rates of addiction and substance abuse are almost twice as much as they are with states which aren't. And over 200 cities and counties in California have banned it because they see the problems resulting.
All right, Kurtis, that's sort of the heart of the argument. And the lawmakers say, Tom says, it's more than about money. You tell me, why is it more than something about money? And you have to keep in mind that a lot of folks who are against it say, you know, it's about our kids. We don't want them exposed to this stuff. It serves no purpose. What say you?
Well, I actually agree with Tom in that the societal cost really needs to be factored in. And when we realize that there's 12,000 people in Minnesota every year being arrested for marijuana, these are people's lives that are being shattered. And
whose lives are being shattered? The ones being arrested?
Correct. Yes.
Well, they're breaking the law.
It is correct that they are breaking the law, but it is a illegal act because of the laws that we have on the books. And that is something that we can actually reform through organizing together with organizations like Minnesota NORML or using.
But how do you
legislative
keep it
process.
out of, the concern is you're keeping it out of the hands of kids and keeping it away from people who use it as a gateway drug, which is a
Correct.
huge concern.
Yes, and once again, I agree about the societal cost. I agree that we do not want kids to be using cannabis. And actually, we believe as Minnesota NORML that by taxing and regulating cannabis, that it will be harder to get cannabis as a child than it is to be able to get that currently.
Tom, let me ask you something about alcohol versus marijuana. We do a story weekly, almost it seems, about somebody who drinks, drives, gets in a car, kills themselves, kills somebody else. We do not hear a lot of stories about people smoking marijuana, getting in a car, and killing somebody. Why is marijuana different or worse than alcohol?
Well, as I just mentioned, in California, they're finding greater prevalence now with drugged driving than drunk driving just because they have medical marijuana. So I think that's an example of where you are seeing the consequences. And with medical marijuana, it's supposedly quite limited. But in fact, they're showing that it basically legitimizes its use among young people. And our concern is that the problems, as they see just with medical marijuana, which is supposed to be narrow, are exploding in California, and they're having problems with it.
That gets me to you, Kurtis, and I want to bring Hazelton into this because they will argue until the sun goes down that this is a gateway drug, that they see it every day in their facility. People who smoke pot end up going to something else, something that provides a better high or is harsher. How do you address that issue? That is something that is hard to argue against.
I completely agree that Hazelton sees a lot of people in their facilities because of marijuana, but often the reason why they are there is because a court has determined or given them the option between going to jail or going to treatment, and often that is a lesser of two evils that's decided on.
All right, 10 seconds, each of you. Do you believe, I'll start with you, Tom, that marijuana will be legalized in this country or in the state of Minnesota in the next, say, 5 years?
I don't think it will in Minnesota, and I think as we see the experience played out in other states with medical marijuana, I think there's going to be a reaction to that and realization that this is not a benign activity.
Kurtis?
Honestly, I believe it will be legal in Minnesota within the next 5 years because of efforts of people like the people at Minnesota Normal.
All right, Kurtis Hanna, Tom Pritchard, appreciate you being here. Thanks
Yeah,
for your
thank
thoughts.
you for having us.
You're welcome.
Well, we're going to talk a little Twins baseball now as part of our Sports Talker segment. Up against the odds again because they're facing the best pitcher in the American League, Justin Verlander, and just his name sends a lot of Twins into shivers, and their fans too.
Yeah, Verlander has owned the Twins lately, winning 7 straight, including this was opening day where he had 7 strikeouts in just 5 innings of work. Pretty impressive.
He is dominant, isn't he?
Yeah, Tigers gave Verlander the lead the first chance they had. Miguel Cabrera